Glad to have you with us back for another episode of the program. My name is Greg Willits from rosaryarmy.com.
And I'm Jennifer Willits, his wife.
The offertory is one of my favorite parts of the Mass. And just recently, while I've been working on this book, my attitude towards the offertory has been changing.
Oh, okay.
So we talked about this recently. I am in the process right now. I have a book coming out very soon. Working title is Discovering the Love of Eternal Wisdom. That's not the final title. It could be the final title. I don't know. We haven't decided that. We're in the process right now of it's going through the copy editing phase with Sophia Institute Press, and the cover and all that will be decided very, very soon. It might even be released earlier than we thought, which is kind of exciting. But going through this book of St. Louis Marie de Montfort's again, The Love of Eternal Wisdom, which is the entire text of which will be included in my book. It's about, or one of the ways that we obtain eternal wisdom, who is Jesus Christ, that we possess Jesus Christ and hold him in our hearts and in our lives in all things at all times. One of the ways to do that is by continually offering up, mortification, which is kind of a scary word. It's our offerings, right? Our daily little pains, annoyances, when people cut us off in traffic, whatever bothers us. Those are the little mortifications. Those are little things that we can offer up, right? It's the old Catholic terminology of offered up. Well, that bothers me. Offer it up. I stubbed my toe. I'll offer it up. And it's almost become a joke, but I suggest that we actually start to reclaim this because of here's the thing. The devil made it a joke. The devil has made the world conditioned to see it as something to mock and make fun of, when it's really this enormous gift that actually can bring us relief and peace whenever we do have an annoyance, whenever we have a pain. So for me, as someone who struggles with mental health issues, I have an incredible amount of anxiety this past week. Since finishing the first full draft of my book, I had the idea of offering up every single moment, every time, at the instant, I start to feel anxiety, and a lot of times I feel it in my face. Instantly go, here, Mother, please give this to your son. Mary, please give this to Jesus. Please give this to Jesus. Okay, why do we do this, right? So we're going to get into that. That offertory is something that we can do all the time, but at Mass, there is a very specific point of offertory where the bread and wine is offered up to God as the means by which transubstantiation may happen and Jesus can become substantially present in the Eucharist, body, blood, soul, and divinity. So Jesus offering himself on the cross, Jesus offering himself in the Eucharist. When we make our offerings, it is our work along with Jesus. In our baptisms, we become sons and daughters of God. We become co-heirs of the kingdom with Jesus. We're right there. So Jesus's offering on the cross can be lived out in our offerings on a daily basis.
I'm so glad you just launched into the appropriate, more complete definition of offertory, because I think it's worth noting that for many, they may be operating only on a financial definition of that term. And I think that we might have been led to believing that that's all that an offertory is because when you look in your bulletin, you'll see a recap of last week's offertory was X amount of dollars. And so by that sharing of knowledge, it sort of conditions the parish to sort of think that that's all an offertory actually is just a financial gift. It's just a reminder, oh yeah, this is the basket's going to come around. I need to put something in there. And they just stay there and operate off of that understanding when it's so much bigger. And you've just leapt right to that. And I love that to you is your favorite time, because I almost kind of thought you were joking at first, because I tend to forget that offertory means all of those things. It's not just a financial transaction, which is still good, and we still need to do that. We'll talk about that later as well. But it really is, what are you going to offer? And it has nothing to do with money now. What are you going to offer?
So let's put some pins in all these things, right? Because the reason why it has always been my favorite part, other than receiving the Eucharist itself, is because I've known for a long time, for many years, and I don't remember how I learned this, but it's been like in the last 20 years, I've learned at the offertory, that's an opportunity for us to say, here's everything I'm struggling with right now. Here's all of my worries. Here's my concerns, all the things I've been praying about this past week, all the things I'm concerned about with the week coming up, job situation and kids and whatever it is that might be troubling you. That's your opportunity, that as the bread and wine is being placed upon the altar and being offered up to God, so too our prayers that we offer up, we put them on the altar so that they are there at the cross of Calvary. Well, I've always liked that idea, but it's also always been a thing where here's my opportunity to just ask for everything and throw everything out there. And so what's been missing, and this is kind of what's been coming to mind so much as I've been working on this book, and as I have gone through the first couple edits, which is what I've done since the last podcast, and now we're in full production mode, with Sophia. I mean, we're on this, so now I'm rereading parts over again. And what's so interesting, I was trying to say this to you on the way home from Mass today, is that rereading de Montfort's Love of Eternal Wisdom over and over and over again, because it's included in the book, I'm like, I've read this thing, I don't know how many times, well over a dozen times now. And I still keep getting nuggets of wisdom, and my desire. The whole purpose of this project in the first place is so that people will start to understand their relationship with Jesus Christ better than they've ever had before. Because I honestly don't think the people, even long time. I'm speaking from my perspective, and this is part of my story as someone who's been Catholic for going on 55 years. I feel like my 55th year is the one where I've grown closest to Jesus. And I don't want people to get discouraged in their own journeys. And I also don't want people to get complacent and think, well, I go to church and I do all these things. And I love Jesus. I don't have a problem. I think that we all have so much more that Jesus is wanting to give us that we don't realize. But a big part of being in a position of accepting everything that Jesus gives us is by giving everything to Jesus that we are and have. There needs to be a greater giving of ourselves to Christ. And I think in the idea of the offertory is our opportunity to say everything that I have. And that's consecration as well. And so that's, the last chapter of Eternal Wisdom is talking about consecrating ourselves. And the easiest way to do that is through the hands of Mary, our mother, who brought Jesus into this world, and she can bring us to Jesus, bring the world to Jesus. She brought Jesus into the world. She brings the world to Christ. Now you're making your smile of thoughtfulness, because I want to read from the 1962 Missal its explanation of offertory, and I think your mind's going to be blown.
Okay, well, I'll just say this one little aside that hopefully will make you smile too. But do you ever think when the basket is coming around or being offered to you, depending on how the baskets are at your parish, that really what you should do is just put your entire self into the basket? Like, I'm just going to hop in there real quick.
I'm thinking, I'm already at the altar. I'm already trying to, again, mental prayer like this requires so much energy for me. I'm often not even aware that the basket is going around. I am so grateful for two things. Number one, you handle the offertory for our family. So that's a blessing. Thank you for doing
the
that. The financial side of things that
Mm-hmm.
And number two, while I'd have some issues with, automatic bank payments and all that kind of stuff, it makes it really easy for us to give to our church. It's all automatic. I mean, you sign something up and it just happens. The offertory just goes. And so we make sure that we're always giving of the 10%, or however much we give to our parish in particular, but we'll get to tithing amounts here in a minute. But I know that that's happening because you've set it up and it's automated through the bank. So when those baskets start coming around, God bless our ushers, I'm not even paying attention to them. I'm already trying to focus on the altar itself. I mean, listen to this. So this is a great explanation, and you can read more about offertory in the Catechism and other places as well. But because we go to the traditional Latin Mass this morning, and I've explained this in my missal, you have the Latin on one side, English on the other. But on the English side, in the margins of my version of the Missal, they just have wonderful explanations of what's actually happening in the Mass. Not just like the rubrics of like the priest walks up here and does this, but actually what God is doing in the Mass. And it's not just the TLM. These things that he's writing about, that are written about in here, are happening in the Novus Ordo. They're happening in the other rites of the Church, in the Mass of the faithful, from the Offertory to the preface of the Eucharistic prayers. The Offertory verse, and the Lord be with you and with thy spirit. Then the offering of the bread and wine. This is the moment that brings us back to our true place before God, and it purifies us. It says it prepares us to enter into God and share in his divine activities. This is what's happening at the Offertory.
Despite us, despite our worthiness, unworthiness.
But that's part of what we're offering up, right? The Offertory opens the door to the secrets of God and to union with him. So it's not just about the ushers coming by with the baskets. And like you said, it's not just about collecting your tithe offering, right? It's a tithe offering. God wants the offering of everything you have. Your finances, your worries, your concerns, your illnesses, your sinfulness, your joys, the graces he gave you. He wants everything back so that he can give you more. As this bread on the paten and this wine in the chalice are in a state of expectancy, so it hasn't happened yet, expectancy of becoming Christ's body and blood, so we present ourselves to God in voluntary expectancy of a change to be made in us, an expectancy of divinization. Now, that alone, shall we spend the next half hour talking about that? So we already, if we believe, and we should as Catholics, we believe the bread and wine will become Jesus' body and blood. Because that bread and wine was offered up to the altar. What should we expect we become when we receive Jesus into us? There should be expectancy of a change to be made in us, an expectancy of divinization because Jesus Christ, the divine, is entering into us. In the Offertory, Christ unites our desires and prayers. So our desires, right? Dear God, help us. Our prayers, please help these people, to his own offering of himself to the Father. So Jesus Christ takes our prayers and unites them to himself. As our intentions are joined to the passion of Christ, they assume the value of the passion in the eyes of God. Boom! As the levels of our podcast just blew up. In the agony of the garden, Christ performed his offertory, giving himself in advance to all the sufferings of Calvary. So again, think about that. In the garden, Christ is offering himself in anticipation, right? Before he actually suffered at Calvary. This is the spirit we should take from the Mass. An entire acceptance in advance of what God's grace will ask of us. It's scary to think when you go through total consecration of Jesus through Mary, some of the prayers that you say, Mother, I'm giving myself entirely to you as your slave, as your servant on behalf of your Son. I give you everything, my possessions, my relatives, and so I have to pray, I give you my wife. If anything were to happen to her, let God's will be done. If anything were to happen to our children, let God's will be done. If our house were to burn down tonight, let God's will be done. These microphones, all these things in this room, let God's will be done. If I were to lose, my mug or my statue of St. Louis Marie de Montfort or my favorite journal, let God's will be done. None of this ultimately belongs to me. I belong to Jesus through Mary, and therefore I should at all times be willing to accept in advance what God's grace will ask of us. Now, here's the glorious thing. God is not just sitting there looking for ways to hurt us. The crosses that he sends us aren't just to cause us pain and misery. They are to purify us so that we can become more perfect offerings, so that we can become more like Christ, who is eternal wisdom, who is the fullness of all the virtues that we know that we long for and need so that we can become more perfect like Christ. These are all good things. This is the line, this is the last line that I'll share from the Missal in regards to the Offertory. The Offertory reminds us that the law of salvation, okay, so what's the law of salvation? Salvation comes from Christ. The law of the salvation is generosity without discussion. Okay? Now let's think about Jesus, right? Jesus in the garden. He said, Lord, if it be your will, let this cup pass from me, but not my will, but yours be done. He didn't say, God, got some alternatives for you here. How about instead of this cup, why don't we do this? Hear me out. Why don't we do? That wasn't a discussion. Here's what's in my mind, but not my will, but yours be done. I'm offering myself without reservation to you. Transform everything. Take away my job, take away my livelihood, take away my family, take away everything I have, but let Jesus Christ remain. That's really hard to do, but that's what we are called to do. So when we talk about offertory, part of what's interesting is these were all the things that were coming to me at Mass this morning. And even one of the readings had to do with being a good steward, right? Mm-hmm. But you and I started talking yesterday about, maybe talking about tithing would be a good subject because you started having, and you've done this with all of our kids, teaching them budgeting lessons because you're a fan of the software that you've used for years. You need a budget. Did Catherine turn you on that? I feel like
no.
Who turned you on to?
Well, I kind of think Pat Padley comes to mind.
Pat Padley?
Yeah, he's a big fan, or we maybe were early adopters around the same time, and I don't know.
Remember ever hearing.
Yeah, does.
Pat Padley, name endorphins for him.
Yes,
got it. He's gone off on his own as he's got a Catholic marketing company now. I don't know what it's called, Pat. I'm sorry. Maybe I'll call him and give him a shout out for all of your marketing needs. Pat Padley Marketing. I don't know if that's what it's called either. Sorry, Pat. We've known him for a long time. It's from the early SQPN days.
So in our marriage, I am the one who generally handles all financial issues and transactions, and I love budgeting. I've always loved it. And it was a real joy in my parenting life to be able to pass on some basic budgeting skills to our children as they were approaching an age that made sense for them to have this information. So largely it was in their teen years when they started earning an income of their own, and then they needed to learn something about management of said income. And so this YNAB software, which we love, is a big part of that.
It's got a lot of similarities to Dave Ramsey's financial peace type of it's the envelope system. It's similar to that.
Very similar to that, and where you basically every dollar you earn, you assign a task. You put all of your working dollars to work for you. And it gets you more in a mind space of holding on to your money so that it can in fact achieve those goals.
Yeah.
And so rather than spending it as it comes in without really knowing what you've done.
So if you get a $500 paycheck, you allocate $100 goes to food, $100 goes to rent, $100 to the car, you allocate it so that at the end it's zero. And then you work as you're spending money, you take it out of those individual buckets.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I've been waiting for our youngest child to get to the place where it would make sense to have this conversation with her. And that time was yesterday. And so I was
she's been working over the summer, making money, spending money.
She's doing good. And I've been watching how she's been managing it and just waiting for the right time to have this sit down talk. So I didn't want to spring this on her because it is an important conversation and I want her to really be available in her head to receive this baton of knowledge, of financial knowledge I'm going to give to her, so that she can grow into adulthood with some sense of responsibility for her financial stewardship. So it was a really good talk, and I highly recommend that if you have this working teenager in your life and you kind of want to do this, just make an appointment. Let the kid know it's coming. I would like to have an hour of your time this afternoon. So let's make it happen. And so we did that, and it was very successful. And but as we sort of like to launch into this conversation, because it's so big, it's so important, you almost don't even know where to start. So I asked her, in what ways do you spend money? Like, tell me everything that you think your money should be spent on. And it's interesting how they answer that question, because they will naturally default to the things that they think are the most important. So food and gas was among the first answers she presented as where her money should be earmarked or allocated to. And then she went to like fun things, and then clothing, and then she was kind of running out of answers. I'm like, is that all? Is there anything else you think you should be doing with your money? Like a worthy expense? And it was hard for her to see it. I'm like, okay, let me introduce you to God as someone that, and then it was like, it was a little bit of an eye roll. And because,
why? Because you knew where you were going to go with this?
Giving to the poor is what mom and dads do. That's nothing to do with me. I'm just a kid, I receive the handout. I don't give, I'm like, oh, well, let's talk about this. This is actually very interesting. As you are growing into adulthood, now you are going to be in a situation where you can contribute, give outward to a greater cause. And I understand that's new for you, and you might have some resistance. And so she did, as her siblings of the past all did the same thing. They immediately questioned me on, is this really what God wants me to do? Do I really have to give a percentage of my income back to God? Like, says who? Really? Like, it's really funny how they all have the pushback because they're teens, and it's like, okay, we're going to talk about this. But I didn't want to force it on her. One, I needed to measure her response. I needed to see what I was working with. And it's like, okay, well, listen, I don't want to force this onto you, but are you open to hearing the truth about this? And then I let her respond to that, and she was like, okay, tell me. And so we had a very high level discussion about the good and the value of tithing, of giving back to God, giving to the poor, and why we do this, and how good it is for us to do this. God is not a creditor keeping track of every percentage point. Well, you've earned $100,000. Where's my 10 grand? Sorry, you can't get to heaven. God is not like that. He's super generous. He's very generous, and he's trying to get you to be generous too. And it starts with the one thing that we have to offer, which is usually in this country, it's our cash, it's our money. And
I like the idea of first fruits, right?
Yeah, first fruits.
That Scripture talks about giving the first fruits of something. So like I remember having conversation with one of our sons who said, well, okay, I don't have a problem with tithing, but can I tithe after tax? It's like, well, then it's not the first fruits that you're giving to God. You're giving God the second fruits. You're giving the government the first fruits, and then you're giving God the second fruits. And what God asks is, you want to give him the cream of the crop, right? You want to give him the best of the best. And so you want to give him the most of the most as well. When I was a kid, and my parents didn't start tithing until I was a kid, and I kind of remember them starting to do this, that someone explained it to them. Someone was helping them to get out of debt. And the first thing this person taught them was that you need to start giving 10% of your gross income, of the top
Right.
of what you're making back to God. And in doing that, God will always, you can't outgive God.
Right.
Just like as we're talking about the offertory of giving fully of ourselves, there's a fear that if we give everything to God, then I'm going to be left with nothing. But what God gives us is the grace to be able to be even more like his son. And that means that we're going to have everything. And so giving 10% of what we have to God is ultimately very little, because God has proven, at least in our lives, that we will continually be taken care of. And so we have found, even in times of low income, that as long as we continue to make sure that the bare minimum that we're giving back to God is 10%, we have never had an unpaid bill, ever. And we've been tithing for well over 20 plus years now on a regular basis. Well, it's even longer than that, probably closer to 25 or more, because it was shortly after we got married, maybe 4 years after we got married. And we're, so 25, 26 years, we have been giving a minimum of 10%. And I'm almost, I don't want to become scrupulous about it, but now I'm almost like, if we sell something on Facebook, I'm like, well, we got to make sure that 10% of that is given away. And to me, it's just because I have seen such blessings come from it. And I just want to make sure that we're always making sure that God and giving back to God is at the forefront of everything that we do. Our Rosary Army apostolate, we give part of our income back to Rosary Army. We give part of our income to our local parish. We'll give part of our income to other charities as well. It always equals up to a minimum of 10%. And it's just, again, look at Rosary Army. Rosary Army is a perfect example of, we've given that money to that apostolate, and somehow that apostolate has been going for 20 plus years. I don't understand how that's worked, but it's the way that God works.
And I gave that very example to Lily. I'm like, if people did not give, then Rosary Army wouldn't even be here.
Yeah.
And she understands Rosary Army because that's her life. She understands
her whole life has been that.
How that has been a providing source for us so that we can keep it going. And it's like, we need to give. We need to give. So, including you as a teen, you need to participate in giving as well. So,
and it's beyond the money. I mean, I want, I don't want the final takeaway to be like, hey, go figure out what you're making and donate 10% of it. It goes back to that beginning part of the conversation. God wants everything that you will give him, and you should give him everything that you have, whether it be your finances, whether it be your worries and concerns, whether it be illnesses that you're dealing with. He can take every single bit of that. And just like when we give our 10%, we have been taken care of financially. You give him your health, you give him your concerns, he will return graces that you cannot comprehend. And it's not a matter of discussion, right? You offer without discussion, and God will give you everything that you need without discussion. That's a great thing to be able to offer, knowing that God will always give that back. So hopefully it's of benefit to you. If you've ever thought, I don't know how to trust God, well, offer that to God. I don't know how to give and financially support my parish. Give that to God. He'll never let you down. Speaking of, and this is a terrible transition. If you want to help Rosary Army, rosaryarmy.com/donate. That's not why we talked about this, but we do need your help, and we want to help you. If you want to grow in your faith, if you're not quite sure next steps, we have lots of great resources available at both rosaryarmy.com as well as schoolofmary.com. If some of the things that we talked about with consecration were a little confusing to you, go check out School of Mary. We have a full total consecration course that you can go through that will walk you through the whole process over the course of 33 days. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. Glad to have you with us, and we'll talk to you again very soon. Until next time, make them,
pray them,
and give them away. God bless, folks.